So picture this. You invest in what you think is your dream office space, only to end up waiting for decades. It sounds like a nightmare, right? Well, today we're diving into a landmark Supreme Court judgment that deals with exactly that. A massively delayed real estate project and a group of homebuyers who simply refuse to give up. And the stakes here, they couldn't be higher. We're talking about 141 different homebuyers, a wait that stretched for nearly 20 years. And it all came down to one final appeal to the highest court in the land. This is the story of their long, long fight for justice. So how did it all unfold? Well, first we'll look at the project's broken promise. Then we'll follow the twists and turns of the legal battle, touching on some really interesting legal rules. And finally, we'll unpack the Supreme Court's definitive verdict. Let's get into it. All right, let's set the scene. At the very heart of this whole case is this ambitious real estate project called the Grand Venezia Commercial Tower. It promised state-of-the-art office spaces, but what it actually delivered was something else entirely. This timeline really just lays out the years and years of disappointment. I mean, look at this. The project launched way back in 2005 with a delivery promised for May 2013. But less than a year after that deadline passed, the developers just stopped paying the assured returns they owed the buyers. And it wasn't until July 2021 that 141 of these home buyers finally got together and took legal action. So that legal action, it kicked off a massive fight. The developers fought back, appealing all the way up to the Supreme Court. This was basically their last stand, their final attempt to stop the home buyers from forcing a corporate rescue of this failing project. And just so we're all on the same page, what the home buyers were trying to do was initiate something called a corporate insolvency resolution process, or CIRP. You can think of it like a rescue plan. When a company can't pay its debts, the creditors, in this case the home buyers, can step in and trigger this process to try and get the project back on track, often under new management. Now, the developers' first argument, their first line of defense, had nothing to do with the building itself. Nope. It was a technicality. It was a numbers game, and it was all about how many home buyers are actually needed to start one of these cases. So here's the question. The law says you need at least 100 home buyers to file an insolvency case against a developer. But what happens if some of those buyers settle their dispute and drop out after the case has already been filed? Does the court still have enough people to continue? The developers argued, hey, look, some people settled, so the number has dropped below 100. The case should be thrown out. But the Supreme Court's ruling was just crystal clear. They said the only date that matters is the day the case is filed. Since the petition started with more than 100 home buyers, the case was solid. Okay, so defeated on that point, the developers tried a different tactic. This time, they focused on their company's structure. They argued that you couldn't file one case against two supposedly separate companies. But the court decided to do something fascinating called piercing the corporate veil, basically looking behind the legal paperwork to see what was really going on. And what the court found was, well, overwhelming. There was a joint venture agreement, they had common directors, they were even issuing payment receipts and demand notices on each other's letterheads. For all practical purposes, these two companies were operating as a single unit. This little detail from the judgment is just staggering. One of the companies, Grand Venezia Ltd, tried to claim it was a highly reputed marketer. But the reality? It was a brand new company, incorporated just 1 month before signing the deal. It literally had no reputation, which heavily suggests it was just a shell company created for this project. All right, now we get to the real heart of the issue. The developers kept claiming the tower was finished, that it was ready to go. But as the homebuyers knew, and the court soon found out, the definition of complete isn't about what you say on paper. It's about the reality on the ground. See, legally speaking, a building isn't considered complete until the local authority issues what's called an occupancy certificate. It's the official green light, the document that says, yes, this building is safe and fit for people to occupy. The Grand Venezia Tower never got a final one for the whole project. So the court sent an official observer to actually go and see the site. And what they found was absolutely damning. Instead of finished offices, floors 3 through 8 were described as nothing more than bare shell structures, just raw concrete with debris scattered everywhere. And this was years after it was all supposed to be done. And it got even worse. The report stated that from the 9th floor all the way up to the 15th, there was just no construction at all. The building just
stopped. And even in the parts where there was some construction, it was nowhere near ready. The observer noted a total lack of basic things like bathrooms and proper lighting. And get this, the walls on the 4th floor weren't even made of brick, but some kind of gypsum-like material. The building was, plain and simple, uninhabitable.
So after going through all the evidence, after hearing all the arguments, the Supreme Court was ready. It delivered its final verdict, and it brought this long, painful chapter to a decisive close. The verdict was a total victory for the homebuyers. The court completely dismissed all of the developers' appeals. It ruled that the insolvency process, that rescue plan the homebuyers had started, had to go forward. And this is why this case is so important for everyone. The Supreme Court upheld 3 absolutely crucial legal principles. First, that 100 homebuyer rule applies only at the very start of the case. Second, you can file a joint case against multiple companies if they're basically working as one on a project. And third, a building isn't complete just because a developer says so. It needs official certification, and it needs to be physically ready for people to actually move in. This judgment is, without a doubt, a major victory that really empowers homebuyers who've been left in the lurch. But it also leaves us with a much bigger question to think about. What kind of message does a ruling like this send to the entire real estate industry about accountability and broken promises? Something to consider.